Hi, Adrian from Fatch Fitness. Today I'm filming this clip at the Australian National University gym. They've kindly allowed me to have access to the facility, in particular to show some of the more dangerous core exercises and core equipment that is typically found in most gyms around the world. And today I want to spend a bit of time talking about the Incline Situp board or Incline Situp machine. Now, this machine is really problematic from a core and hip flex perspective because it's a bit of a double whammy with the exercise. And what I mean by that is that firstly you get to put your feet underneath, and from previous clips I've talked about the moment your feet are engaged, your hip flexors can then switch on and do a lot of the work. Secondly, because it's a decline and you're having to sit up further against gravity, then the body will do whatever it can to try and help, and then again, of course, if the hip flexors are engaged, then the hip flexors can do a whole stack of work. Now, one of the real problems with this exercise, because your feet are clipped underneath, is that you can do the exercise with almost no lumbar flexion at all. So I'm going to demonstrate now what I think is the correct way you should do the sit-up, incline sit-up, and then I'll show you what typically happens. And there isn't a lot of lumbar flexion early on. There might be a little bit at the top of the movement, but generally happens you can sit up with a straight back. So let me demonstrate. So here I am in my start position, and again, doesn't matter where your arms are, I'll put them here for now. So how I think you should start the exercise is you should just do a purely lumbar flexion. So you see I flex through the torso, and I'm really not engaging my hip flexors much at all at this point. Now what happens, of course, is that I can get to here and then lift up, and so what I've done is I've done a bit of a sequence. I've done lumbar flexion followed by hip flexion. Now the problem what we see though, of course, is that what people do is they will often sit up, and you see that in this position here, I've actually not flexed in my lumbar vertebrae at all, or my torso. It's all just been hip flexor and a sort of hip flexion movement, and that puts a huge amount of stress on your lumbar vertebrae because your hip flexors are doing all the work. And so it's really something you should try and keep right away from in terms of doing this exercise. And look, and not a week goes by that I don't have someone come up to me and say, hey, I saw you showing someone how to do an incline sit-up correctly, and wow, my back really hurts when I do this, what's going on? And that's purely because of hip flexor engagement. So what to do? So firstly, I'd say just don't use the machine, but reality is if you wanted to use this machine, there are 4 things that you should try and focus on. So firstly, don't have the decline too steep. You can have it extremely steep, and that just further exacerbates the issue. Secondly, make sure you initiate the movement with a strong lumbar flexion, not hip flexion. Thirdly, only sit a partial way up. You don't need to sit all the way up, because remember, once you've actually lifted your rib cage off the platform, then it's just hip flexors from there onwards. And then fourthly, I'd say keep the reps really low, because the moment fatigue sets in with your core, your hip flexors just can jump in, take over, and start really loading your lower back.